Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of Trump versus Firebat. This is going to cover the next couple of matches between these two. So I went back and listened to part 1 of this, and you could definitely hear my swallowing sound when I cleared my throat that entire time. Um, I don't really want to do that retake all over again, and I don't really have the publishing abilities to be able to edit those out. So it's just going to have to be an embarrassing moment for me for the rest of my life. So from now on, I'm going to be sitting a little bit farther away from the microphone so that you can't hear that. Apologies. Anyway, so going into this match, we have Firebat electing to go with the Freeze Mage, whereas Trump went with the Handlock. Basically, Firebat's just trying to pick up a free win here with this Freeze Mage. He knows it's not very favored against anything Trump has. And Trump obviously has all of his decks to pick from at this moment. Handlock is an interesting choice, especially because he knows that the Patron Warrior is gone from Firebat. But it's not the worst choice ever, especially because a lot of people pick the same deck again after their deck has already lost, and so it allows your opponent to kind of sometimes your opponent can anticipate that and basically counter your deck. So not the worst idea to switch it up a bit. And Handlock, as I mentioned before, isn't the worst against Freeze Mage because of the heal bots and the Lotheb that's potentially in it. So we start off with Trump having an okay hand with the Mountain Giant, able to put on some pressure potentially. Firebat plays out the Mad Scientist. The good thing about this is that this Mad Scientist is going to get a lot of damage in over the next couple turns. Firebat could have gone with the Blood Mage Thalanos, but goes for the more mana efficient play. And gets 2 secrets in this hand, which is really a bad situation, especially with the Mad Scientist already on the board. But this Mad Scientist is going to keep on swinging, which is pretty good, considering that you don't really have to Alex Draws your opponent if you can get steady damage this way. Trump has the option of using one of these Ironbeak Owls since he has a second one. One of the things to consider, however, is that when you can use both Owls on Doomsayers in a row, it can really be backbreaking for your opponent, especially if they were relying on that to clear your board. So he figures his hand's good enough, and he doesn't have to owl that, especially because it could just get pinged off, and he's going to take damage anyway, especially if Firebat doesn't have a turn to play. So he goes for the little bit greedy play, and allows Firebat to start developing the board, which he does. And this is pretty good for Firebat so far, because he's getting a lot of damage in with just minions, which is not typically something you're able to do as the Freeze Mage. At this point, Trump, he decides to play the biggest minion that he has, going with the Mountain Giant, in order to afford him the most damage going in future turns. He figures he's probably either going to play Defender of Argus or the Sludge Belcher next turn, and he wants to get as much damage as possible to put the most pressure on Firebat as possible. And he knows that the extra health, the extra 2 health from the Drake, is not going to actually make much of a difference in the long run, or even the short run, because Firebat really can't deal with that much health at all. And if Firebat does decide to get rid of this Mountain Giant, then it's not that big of a deal. Firebat could have gotten rid of this Mountain Giant, but if considering the hand that Firebat has, stalling just wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. For instance, if he Fireballed and Thalanos it, then Trump could play out something like another Giant, maybe a Drake, and start putting on that pressure, and then now Firebat doesn't have the ability to burst Trump down. So Firebat definitely looking at the contents of his hand and adjusting from there. And picking up the Frostbolt just kind of further solidifies his mindset that I just need to burst my opponent down in this game. He goes for the Ice Block first because he feels that he might not have the time in order to play Ice Block later. And even though Ice Barrier does afford him a little bit of a time, the board from Trump can get so ridiculously big that the Ice Barrier might not matter. So going with the Ice Block there basically says that I can do whatever I want from now on until he pops the block, which is pretty smart in my opinion. So he just goes ahead and puts as much pressure on as possible. Basically the only way that this gets punished is with the hand that Trump exactly has, which is Molten NT Kill or Coin NT Killbot, which Trump does this turn. And it's just really unfortunate for Firebat, honestly, because you never keep Molten Giants versus Freeze Mage, and Trump knows that that Firebat is playing Freeze Mage, so having the Moltens here would just be pure happenstance and pure coincidence. And you don't really keep anti-killbots either. You kind of just want to get your big threats. It's too risky to keep something like anti-killbot and have them get stuck in your hand and let your opponent have free reign. To do whatever they want while you don't put any pressure on them. So that's a bad strategy as well. So you're not really keeping heal bots, you're not really keeping Moltens, and it's just unfortunate that Firebat got really punished for his play by getting him down to 11. But in most situations, it would have been the right play. So in this situation, Firebat has the choice of Blizzard, but he picks up the Loot Hoarder, which allows him to squeeze into Ping as well as a Frost Nova to freeze his opponent's board. He sees that he has the Frost Nova, or excuse me, the Frostbolt and the double Ice Lance in hand, which is 11 damage just for 4 mana. So it goes for this play, it goes for Loot Hoarder, wants to dig a little bit deeper. He has the 11 damage in hand, just needs like another Fireball or something. He also has the Alexstrasza potentially in a couple turns, so... but he knows that he can't really rely on the Alexstrasza right now. Also, pinging face might bait Trump into using an additional heal bot. And in this situation, Trump does something very, very interesting and just plays nothing and passes. And the reason for that is because he only has 2 more spots left on his board, and he feels like he might need the extra space to play something like Double Owl, or an Owl heal bot, or something of that nature. And he already has plenty of power on the board to pop an Ice Block, and even an Ice Barrier and an Ice Block at the same time. Or excuse me, pop an Ice Block through an Ice Barrier. So he decides to just let it go and pass, which is an interesting play, and I think I would agree with it. Firebat really has no choice here but to go ahead and cycle his Loot Hoarder and Blizzard. Here, he's basically going to get his Ice Block popped this turn if he doesn't do it. And stalling a couple more turns allows him to obviously draw into more burn for the next couple turns. And this also allows him to fit a ping in as well, which is nice. Every single point of damage matters. The thing is right here is what Firebat is thinking about is that Trump has 24 damage with the Giant alone. What he could do is ping the heal bot and be able to Alexstrasza later. And maybe put up a barrier to prevent Trump from being able to pop the block at all. But what he's thinking right now is that if he top decks something good, then he won't have to actually use the Alexstrasza anyway. And it's kind of like a backup plan if Trump decides to like panic Killbot at this moment, but he doesn't want to be in a situation where he has to use it. So Trump having 5 spots, or having now 4 spots on the board, feels it's okay to put this Drake on the field, which is very, very hard to kill. Sylvanas is really unplayable at this moment because his opponent could just play Doomsayer and Fireball Sylvanas, and now your entire board's gone and you have no pressure, which gives your opponent obviously plenty of time. Firebat in this situation, he can't really burn him down. It just makes more sense to go with the Alexstrasza for the extra 2 damage this turn. It's kind of sad because you're basically only doing more damage than the ping would do, but he essentially has to go for it because there's nothing else to do. Picking up the Ice Block is a huge dead draw. The only other option he really had was to go Acolyte of Pain, ping, and then play the Ice Barrier. But this turn makes sense as well. It forces Trump to deal with this. If he doesn't have another heal, but he's basically just dead over the next couple turns because of that Ice Block. The Ice Block basically changed the calculus for Firebat because the Frostbolt, double Ice Lance, what was that? So that would have been... 11, okay, so it's 14. Yeah, so he actually has lethal the following turn if Trump doesn't have any healing, which is definitely very possible. It's pretty unlikely for Trump to have the second anti-heal bot in his hand at this moment. But fortunately for Firebat, Trump does. He just pops the block and then as low as possible. Plays this anti-heal bot. I believe he doesn't play anything else. He needs to just have the space on the board for future plays, for instance, Double Owl or something like that. And Firebat, all he can really do is Ice Block, push a lot of damage, hopefully top deck something. He thinks about the Acolyte of Pain, but he really needs the mana because he can, like I said, he has 14 damage with the double Frostball, double Ice Lance. which leaves him searching for 9 more, which means he can't actually kill him unless he puts a little extra damage on this turn. At this point, Firebat's kind of just lost. I mean, not lost as in lost the game, lost as in he's not really sure what to do because he's just put in a really horrible position. And even though Trump got a little bit lucky, this is basically the reason why Handlock is, I would say, favored in this matchup these days. Because if you think about it, Firebat got a little bit lucky as well, getting all that burst in hand, and Trump having no way to deal with it. So I would say that it seems like Trump got a little bit lucky here, but it basically went both ways, and Trump's lucky draws basically counteracted Firebat's more or less lucky draws. I mean, the only way that this would have been better for Firebat is if he had something like Thorson plus Antonidas to be able to enable these, because with just Antonidas it wouldn't have been good by itself, and with just Thorson he would make his stuff cheaper, but then wouldn't actually increase the amount of damage that he had. So he would actually have to have like a ridiculous draw for this to work out in his favor. And there comes the Doomsayer, and really his only option left is to search for Frost Nova to be able to clear his opponent's board potentially. But yeah, can't really do anything. And kills himself. So that was one of the more winnable games, even though, like I said, I feel like Handlock is favored. The fact that Trump, as you saw on the top there, had 2 oozes, as well as the fact that... I'm sorry, let me start over. The fact that Trump had 2 oozes in his deck makes it even better a situation for the Freeze Mage. So that's one match that Firebat was really looking to take. And it really bodes poorly for him going forward. His only real other chance for the Freeze Mage to win or have a kind of an even-ish matchup would be against the Patron Warrior, and that's just a really hard matchup to think about. But that's definitely his best chance. Just kind of potentially taking advantage of Trump's maybe inability to play the deck to its fullest potential, although Trump has been getting a lot better and playing that deck very well recently, so it's something you can completely rely on. In any case, going on to the next game, this game, Firebat decides to go away from Freeze Mage for a moment, goes to Priest, which makes a bit of sense because of the decks left in Trump's lineup. It's 2 out of 3 times it runs into... No, sorry. 1 out of 3 times it runs into a good matchup. One out of 3 times it runs up into Druid, which is an okay matchup, and the other time it runs against Patron, which is capable of winning, but it's definitely not as bad as Handlock. So once Handlock's out of the way, it kind of makes sense for Firebat to go for this. Trump decides to just mix it up again, go for his Greedy Druid. And one thing you'll see right away in Firebat's Priest is you'll see that he actually has Bomb Lobber in his Priest, which is such an interesting tech card if you think about it, because what it allows him to do is have a card that's multifunctional. A lot of times Priest, all their cards just do one thing and that's it. They kill something, they shower pain. Sometimes you can steal a minion, sometimes you can Shadow Madness kill 2 things, but it really doesn't advance your board all that much. It can be backbreaking for aggressive decks, but if you're playing against something more mid-range, it doesn't really do a whole lot. And something like Bomb Lobber can, for instance, kill like an Azure Drake if you're playing against Rogue. It really helps against them in the matchups that aren't the greatest for the Priest. As far as these openings go, Trump had a pretty obvious opening going with the Wild Growth. Firebat goes for the Northshire Cleric start, reasoning that he's fine with his opponent using Wrath on it, for instance. Just kind of playing the odds, and then going with the Powered Shield on the next turn. He could have coined a Valence Chosen a turn earlier, but he's really afraid of getting that immediately silenced and basically losing a card for free. Also, he's coming up on coin Bomb Lobber or coin Loatheb, so good patience by Firebat. First playing out the Powered Shield, and then kind of baiting out the Keeper of the Grove, and then now being able to play this Bomb Lobber, which is good wherever it hits. Probably better to hit the Shade, but good regardless. Hits the Druid of the Claw, is able to clear that off. Trump is a little bit confused at the tech card. And from here, what Trump can do is he can basically set up an eventual lethal, because he has turn 7 Force Nature Savage Roar with the Innervate. But um, I believe he goes for. I believe he decides to kill off this North Star Cleric to shut off the card draw, and then he plays the Shade of Naxxramas. But yeah, it's really interesting decision because I mean obviously this North Star Cleric can get out of control as far as drawing a bunch of cards with a priest, especially something like Light Bomb, which could eventually kill the shades off. But it allows Firebat to deal with this right away, and Firebat gets pretty lucky here, drawing this Holy Nova, clearing both cards off, and it spells basically disaster for Trump. Because now he obviously only has spells in hand. The Ancient War is a pretty good draw, but it just gets countered by death right away. And Firebat does the smart thing. He just does it. Plays Wild Pyromancer second. There's no reason for him to wait with his Wild Pyromancer because he just basically wants to get the pressure on right away and kill him as fast as possible. It's not always you get in this position versus Druid, but Druid obviously has a hard time clearing minions, and Firebat has a read that Trump is basically stuck with certain things in hand because of his inability to do things in prior turns. And putting on the pressure now, Druid has a couple of healing options, but overall not that many. And yeah, it just makes sense to go put on the pressure now. Trump is forced to hero power turn 8, which is really a horrible position to be in, obviously. Yeah, Firebat just goes to the Loatheb. I mean, I'm not really doing a whole bunch of analysis here because there's not really much for the players to do. Firebat doesn't really want to be playing Power Word Shield because it hurts his other minions and allows them to be kind of taken out, essentially. He doesn't really need to do anything right now. Also, the Power Shield could help in basically taking health off some of the minions of Trump in the future. But it's just a really unfortunate situation because if Trump had kept his shades, he might have been able to kill his opponent pretty early with the double combo there. And he's basically forced to heal in the situation because he's dead on board. Technically, he could just hero power. He could hero power out range, and Druid has, or excuse me, Priest doesn't always have ways to deal any damage. Okay, never mind. He does draw here. I'm actually forgetting the end of this game because I just remembered it being so one-sided. In any case, Firebat has lethal regardless. So this was just an unfortunate game for Trump. He really had nothing to do. Drew all the spells, and Firebat had more or less the perfect answers. And this is what can happen with Priest, and why sometimes this game, the matches between these two classes end up being really one-sided, either one way or the other. Sometimes they can go really long and drawn out, but that requires basically like either a good start by both sides or a bad start by both sides. And a lot of times you see kind of a crazy situation where Priest can run away with the games with their buffs and their heals, and Druid can never deal with it. Or the other way, where the Druid gets the ramp and they get the fast start, and Priest just basically does nothing, basically just passes for the first few turns. And in that case, you saw the former example, which I just mentioned, where basically Firebat just runs away with the game. So that will conclude Game 3, Firebat up 2-1, and click to Part 3 for the next couple matches.